Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting immersive education webinar powered by 3D Organon. During this insightful webinar, Stephanie Morrison and Keenan Flegel will share their experience of integrating immersive technologies into the curriculum at Saskatchewan Polytechnic, Canada. They will present us how VR can transform traditional anatomy education into a more engaging learning experience.
Welcome, everyone. As I was introduced, I'm Stephanie Morrison, and beside me is Keenan Flegel. Today, we'll be sharing our journey that we've had so far with immersive technology, particularly 3D Organon software, and how we've incorporated it into our practical nursing program.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. A little bit of I get an extended background for Stephanie and I as why this interests us. As she says, she's got an anatomy background. Before I moved into technology, into this space, I actually have a kinesiology degree. Spent a lot of time in the personal training world. Owned a fitness business. So when Stephanie and I connected about this, I had a real keen interest to kind of move forward with how technology can enhance anatomy instruction here at Saskatchewan Polytechnic. So,
All right, so for just a slight brief overview of what we'll be covering today, we're going to start with a little bit of a background at what are we doing for virtual reality at Saskatchewan Polytechnic to give some context, as well as what are some of the events that led for us to sort of look at what are some different technologies that we can use when we're teaching anatomy. So we're going to sort of share our journey. It was sort of started as a pilot phase. And currently we're sort of in our phase two in relation to the two anatomy courses that we teach to practical nursing. So along this way, we'll let you know about some of the shifts that we've had to adjust to in terms of the technology, our learning activities, as well as share some of our challenges that we've had, but also how creative we've been able to be to find some of the solutions and just sharing that when I've watched other webinars is nice to know, there's things that you can do to, there's always going to be some challenges and you can manage that. As well, we'll look ahead at what are we sort of thinking and hoping with our future of VR. And then we'll sort of allow the tables to turn so that you guys can also have a Q&A and ask us some questions or maybe we've sparked some curiosity and we can maybe have a discussion.
I think before we get into the project itself, I want to give a little context on Saskatchewan Polytechnic for those who aren't familiar. This way, it'll kind of give you some context as to some of the challenges we did have to face as far as geography goes. Saskatchewan Polytechnic is based out of Saskatchewan, Canada, so we're almost right in the middle of Canada. We have four campuses across four cities, but those campuses also have multiple buildings. For example, our Saskatoon campus has 11 buildings across the city. So there's some complexities there when we're working with different faculties and programs when we're trying to integrate emerging technology, especially when it comes to funding and budgets. To give you a little context, if you look at the map, you can see that there's four symbols, those Sask Polytech symbols. I'll use Regina as the pinpoint, as that's where Stephanie and I are located at, and that's where our pilot started. Regina is about 71 kilometers away from Moose Jaw. If you're driving at about 120 kilometers an hour, it's about 45 minutes. So it's not too bad of a trip. But if we're heading up to Saskatoon, that's 263 kilometers, 2.5 hours roughly. And to go to Prince Albert from here is 361 kilometers. It's upwards to 4 hours. So we're spread out, which creates some complexities when we're looking at dispersing and using this emerging technology. So virtual reality at SAS Polytech, I think it's helpful to get kind of a broader idea idea of the landscape of emerging technology at SAS Polytech. VR hasn't been or isn't just limited to this program and this pilot. It's part of a growing institutional strategy that's supported by the department I work in, Learning Technologies. Ultimately, the institution's goal is to expand VR as a scalable cross-campus teaching tool, as well as to develop a centralized locale for the management of all XR technology. And essentially what we mean by that is, and one thing we found, especially I found over the last 2 years or so, is many programs, there's kind of pockets of programs located all across our institution that have purchased or attempted to implement virtual reality or extended reality in some way. And we've found headsets sitting on shelves collecting dust. Um, and what that really shows me is this isn't as easy as let's buy a headset, let's plug it in, let's go. There's a big process to it. And that's essentially where that local piece comes into to establishing a centralized location for the management and support of this technology, which our department is doing. The role of learning technologies and learning technologies essentially is a support department. We have instructional design, our media productions, AV services, graphic artists, all the way to us in learning technology training. We support faculty with development of resources and learning how to use technology. And that's primarily my role is helping implement and ensuring that faculty know how to competently use the technology. So again, we with this type of work in the TEL department and the TEL area, we support the equipment procurement, so helping programs research and find the appropriate hardware, software, and whatnot, and life cycle planning, which is really, really big. Technology turns quick, and in 5 years, are we prepared or less prepared to start updating our equipment? So our department is really heavily involved in that. We provide training for faculty. Essentially, we're ensuring our faculty are comfortable with the use of the technology. We provide support in the setup, updates, maintenance, workflows. Our ILDC, which is the Instructional Leadership Development Center, they're focused on pedagogy and andragogy. What they do is we work with them as far as creating mindful and intentional implementation of the technology. So whether that's through learning activity design and assessment design, they're to help. We work together with them to ensure that this is done in a mindful way. And like I said, LT has essentially become that centralized locale for all things XR, which I think is really helped. I'll show in a few slides here the boom, I would say, with technology. And you can see that with how many headsets and kind of the investment the institution's made over the last couple of years in this realm. We've also developed a working group. It's called the Spatial Learning Working Group. And essentially, we've coined it as spatial learning to kind of encompass not just XR technology, but also to encompass 360 videos, 3D images, to encompass all the other areas that in our department that do a lot of great work that fit into this world. So we create and curate resources on those types of subjects, as well as ensure faculty are aware of those services and kind of get them in those doors and start utilizing those services in a meaningful way. We also create connections across the institution. We're ensuring that the institution is up to date and understanding the kind of the rapid improvement in this world and understanding what technology and what software is available. And then we train and update our important stakeholders on all things XR. So this group is made up of primarily learning technology folks, but we ensure that we are present across the institution, ensuring everyone is up to date on the latest things in spatial learning, as well as some of the important areas outside of learning technologies that maybe consult or work with other groups as far as curriculum design and all that type of work. So we have established what's called our mobile labs. This is to support institution-wide integration. These are owned and operated through Learning Technologies. They're portable XR labs. They support, I say multiple programs here, but all programs. They're a shared institutional resource. And what I mean by that is our main focus here is to ensure we're all playing in the same sandbox, to break down the silos that have existed across the institution, where we're just working in pockets and trying to implement this technology alone and without support and without working together and share some of those resources. We're ensuring that this is kind of a shared sandbox for everybody. So we have devices on each campus. It's a large mobile cart, as you can see in the picture. It's just a big tin cart that has UV sanitization, charging. We've got battery chargers in it. It locks, so we can move it around anywhere. What this allows us is some flexibility. We can just move around and go to people as needed. Of course, we are looking into lab development, but having the ability to move is also great. You notice we have more in Regina and Saskatoon than Moose Jaw, PA. Demand's a little bit higher at this time, and they are bigger campuses. And it's all managed, our device management's through Manage XR, so this really allows us to ensure devices are updated. We know where they are at all times. We can shut them down. We can do restarts, push updates, all that type of stuff. So it really makes it easy to manage these devices from that type of platform. So the mobile labs is a great way for our programs, whether they are experimenting with the technology, trying to see if this is going to be a fit for them. It removes the barrier of, well, I've got to now go purchase expensive equipment just to see if this is going to work for us. We have that equipment. So it's great for pilots. It's great for testing things out, but it's also great beyond that. You know, some programs, they may not need these carts and this hardware all the time. So what this does is it allows them to use it maybe the few times a year that they will actually need the hardware. And then we do have some institutional approved software, typically third-party software that has been shared across all programs. And so programs can actually, you know, if they want to use one of the primaries that we're using as body swaps, we can, you know, one program can use it a few times a year, the next program can, and they can be interspersed throughout. So it just allows everyone to work together and not have to spend a ton of resources to use something for such a small period of time. This allows everyone to kind of get into that world a little bit easier. This is outside of the mobile labs. Other programs have purchased, whether it's through academic innovation funding, integrative development funding, capital funds, numerous sources of funding that's available in and out of Sask Polytech to support their programs and integration of this technology. These are owned and used by the programs and maybe by multiple instructors and maybe multiple courses in the programs, but they are supported by Learning Technologies and somewhat managed by us as far as the management system. We support updates and all that type of stuff as well. So, and all this equipment, minus the plumbing, our earliest adopters, has all been supported from day one to full implementation and full use by Learning Technologies. So really the key point here is my full belief is having a support department helping every step of the way really makes this successful. And we can see here that, of course, our arts and science program, so Stephanie's program, we have a total of 99 headsets across 3 campuses. Our simulation centers are using virtual reality for clinical, and plumbing is our earliest adopters. About 3 years ago, we're the only program, 32 headsets, and now you can see we've got 235 across our 4 campuses. So we've grown quite quick and exponentially in the last few years. Just a quick snapshot of what's happening right now across our institution. Our occupational health and safety program up in Saskatoon is using a program called Hard Hat VR for hard skills safety training, working from heights, confined spaces, those types of things. Our plumbing department, our earliest adopters, is using an Interplay Skill Mill software for hard skill trades programs. Our mining program is using a customized, third-party but customized mining software up in Saskatoon. Our justice studies program is using body swaps with full integration into the curriculum. So it's actually built deeply in now. With AI role plays for conflict resolution, de-escalation, navigating angry conversations, those types of things for the roles that they'll be entering in policing, corrections, and whatnot. Simulation Labs, as I mentioned, is using a software called UBSim for clinical. Our students actually do receive clinical hours through virtual reality. Hours are really hard to come by these days here, at least in Saskatchewan. So VR is being supplemented in some way for that as well. Early childhood education, business, and nursing, they're in the early stages using body swaps for soft skill, working with patients, angry conversations, And then finally, we have our continuing care aides and nursing programs that are using it's the American Foundation for Alzheimer's. And this is a dementia 360 video dementia tour. It's simply replacing their old outdated dementia experience to give them a fully immersive and an idea of what it's like in the day in the life of someone experiencing dementia symptoms. Really in the idea of building empathy when you're going out to work with patients in that area.
So one thing I'm going to know, thanks, Keenan. One piece I'm going to add that I didn't before, as an arts and science program head, I have faculty that yes, we're on different campuses. I, sort of manage the Regina one, but we teach into a lot of different types of programs. So certificates, diplomas, even degree programs. So when at our institution, when we want to sort of incorporate anything or do something new, you do need to make a case for it. So part of what I was trying to do is look at three different lenses. I'll talk through just quickly what to try and make a strength or a case, a business case. Why should we implement VR with anatomy in order to get headsets and get money for software? So there was three different lenses. In terms of the pedagogical lens, that's the biggest piece where I feel like I had the strongest evidence and could really start to look at why do we need it? So since COVID, there were a variety of different things that we were noticing, not just in the practical nursing anatomy courses. We do teach into some of the other health sciences, but it was a general sort of theme. We were seeing a slight increase in attrition. With practical nursing, we teach two anatomy courses, one in year one, semester one, and the second one still in year one, but semester two. And students were not as engaged. I think coming back from being away, I don't know, and just our learners are starting to change. And just their preparedness in terms of how to handle the volume when you're teaching anatomy. There's a lot of memorization that is rote that you have to have a base understanding of before you can start to understand the physiology, because our courses are both anatomy and physiology combined. So they were struggling, and instructors were sometimes getting frustrated. So part of my job before as a program head, I did teach anatomy and physiology. I come from a healthcare background. So I used to be in practice a long time ago. So I'm like, let's look into the literature. There's got to be things that we can do. So a lot of stuff was trying to look at creating active learning situations, whether it's a case study, can you gamify, can you do things like immersive technology? Looked at lots of different studies. How did they implement it? How did they do it at different, even though we're not a medical institution, how did, when I was looking to specifically anatomy courses, there was some great success in there. You can start to manipulate organs. You can see those spatial relationships better. Students seem to do better. So then I was always trying to look at, okay, I need to know the specifics. How did you do some of these things? So sometimes it was obvious in literature how they treated their assessments or assignments, or how did they integrate it. Sometimes it was vague, so it was a little bit tricky, but I felt there were good results showing an improvement with using things like VR. So that was part of when I was creating my proposal. That was one of the lenses. Return on instruction. We don't have access to a cadaver lab since we're not a medical institution in Saskatchewan. We do sometimes have done in the past some live dissections with animal specimens, and that was starting to get a little bit harder to find. Even if you have anatomical models that are plasticized or other things, or in formaldehyde, there's a lot of upkeep and it takes up space, and sometimes we don't always have the same amount of money. So looking at moving and transitioning away could give over time some cost efficiency and savings. We have to go through less dissection tools, less exposure to chemicals and things like that. And one of the other pieces is, since practical nursing is taught on three different campuses, we could create a consistent learning experience. Because right now, if you were to look in each of the anatomy labs or locations on each campus, they don't all have the exact same models and the same access. So part of trying to create that consistent space for our learners was key as well. That third lens, it's a little bit different. It's sort of looking if you have a learning issue, the DICE model, it sort of looks at, are things dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, or expensive? I could find some things to sort of strengthen my argument, particularly in impossible and expensive. But really, there still is a cost with, the software and the headset, but trying to take things from two dimensions from on a piece of paper where students can't visualize, well, it's behind there and superior, like up over here and over, like, to understand that is really, really hard. We don't have access to, like, there's just a lot of things that there is cost savings long term. So I felt like, that's great. It's going to be safer. We can find ways, and the accessibility for our learners will be great. So all in all, I put together a proposal, and in that I sort of said, we will start a trial on the Regina campus with one cohort, because I felt, well, if I'm going to do this, let's start small. And if it works, then for phase two, then I would be like, then we'll expand to the Prince Albert and Saskatoon campus. And then the hope is if everything continues to do well, we do teach into things like other programs like dental hygiene, health information management, psychiatric nursing, there's other paramedics. So that was sort of the gist of what I wanted to do. And then Keenan's going to take over of what did we do with the pilot phase? So go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so in the pilot phase one, which was the 24-25 academic year, we essentially, it started out with a lot of conversations between Steph and I. She came to me and said, hey, I've been doing a lot of research on VR for anatomy. And I said, well, you know what? I've actually also been looking into a little bit with some of this tech. And so we kind of took off from there as to doing some research. We broke it into kind of three phases or three stages in our first phase of the pilot. The first one was the procurement. We moved into the setup and deployment, and then the maintenance and sustainability. Um, so building a sustainable or a successful initiative, it really did require a lot of collaboration, a lot of ongoing support. Wasn't just between my department and her department or the two of us, but it was a lot of departments here at Sask Polytech, from our facilities to our tech services or IT department and beyond that. So really, there was a lot of moving pieces, especially when you imagine going across eventually across three campuses. There were some complexities there. But in phase one, we started here in Regina, and it started with the procurement of the devices. And really what we lumped in there was the research. We looked at what hardware is out there. So we thought, okay, we what do we need? Do we need a standalone or something that's wired in? We came down to, well, standalone is going to be more appropriate because we are going to have a large amount of students in a classroom. We need something that's going to be cost effective. Ultimately, I think like many institutions, we ultimately went to MetaQuest headsets. Those are the most cost-effective headsets. And then something that's going to be durable, something comfortable, ease of use. The nice thing about MetaQuest, at least, but most headsets, is there's a lot of customization with accessories. So we were able to get different interfaces and head straps and battery packs and things like that. So we really did a lot of research into what's going to be the most appropriate hardware. Then we moved into the software piece. And we ended up testing about 4 different pieces of software, and ultimately, well, we're here today. We chose 3D Organon for this project because really there was a few things we looked at. Ease of use, they kind of stood out right on top of that. And so I'm turning this in now to a promotion, but uh, essentially the ease of use was a big part. Accessibility was another one. The fact that there's 2 platforms that you can access this software is important. When we're looking at education and our students, not all students can access a headset for whatever reason that might be. We do need to have another version or another option available, and having the desktop version available for our learners has been certainly outstanding and a great thing for us. Cost was one piece as well, and and then compatible with the headset that we chose, and obviously it works well with the MetaQuest. So. And then with our device management system as well, we looked into how are we going to manage these things. Can 3D Organon work across that device management platform? Of course it can. So we were able to move forward with that hardware and the software piece. And then we also looked into Regina, into our anatomy lab. There is a lab that is primarily used for Stephanie's courses. So we decided, well, let's set this up into something that's going to be accessible, easy to use, has enough room and space, movable tables, chairs. We ended up mounting 3 ViewSonic interactive flat panel displays on one side. And that allows our students who can't be in a headset to use those mounted displays to manipulate the object on a larger screen, as well as a large 80-inch interactive flat panel at the front, so the instructor can cast the headset for demonstrations and those types of things. So the room was well set up. We're able to work that into our proposal, and then ultimately we're granted the funds to purchase the hardware, the software, and set up that anatomy lab. Of course, all of that had to include our tech services for network and infrastructure, and our facilities had to come in to ensure we can mount the displays in appropriate walls. And so there was a lot of work to simply get that set up. Of course, once we had all that purchased, we moved into the setup and deployment. First, the physical lab space was configured. We had the TVs mounted. We had the room set up. But then it was to get the devices set up, the mobile lab set up. Of course, one issue we had is we just ordered all the equipment and we had to set it up ourselves. Lesson learned, there are suppliers that will do that for you. So you can actually reach out to a supplier in Canada. CDW or Insights are some of the suppliers that we deal with. They actually have that service where they can set up your devices, all the accessories and stuff. So next time, I think I would go that route. That should be in my lessons learned slide. But so we did all that on our own. Setting up the software, I do have to give praise to 3D Organon from our first year, logging into each headset was a little challenging. Into the second year, they changed that process, which made it a heck of a lot easier for us. Just using little codes within the software, entering it on a PC, and they just automatically log in. It's changed. It's certainly sped up workflows for me, so I really do appreciate that. And then we went into deployment. So once we were in deployment, of course, we were thinking about some of this stuff, but we started to really realize, the importance of sanitization protocols, regular updates. So creating some workflows and protocols around those areas. Battery health and charging became a question. So, we plug our card in, turn it on, and leave it charge all the time when we're not using it. We risk overcharging our headsets. We do it manually once in a while. What do we do there? We could have a student put a headset on and the headset's dead. So we had to really create some workflows there, and I'll explain some of the changes we made in a little bit around that. And then life cycle planning. So great, we have these nice fancy headsets. Our software is set up, we're deploying it. What happens when the MetaQuest 4 or the MetaQuest 16 comes out in a few years? Now what do we do? How are we going to upgrade these headsets into something that ultimately this is not going to be in use anymore? So what are we going to do? So thinking about long term, what's going to happen there? So why does all that matter? Of course, I don't want to underscore the pedagogy piece. That is very, very, very important. Working with folks that can help you integrate the technology in a very mindful, pedagogically sound way is very, very important. The success of the project lies on that too. However, from my lens, again, I mentioned finding random headsets across our campuses is equally relied on stable and reliable hardware, sustainable workflows, support structures that give instructors confidence, and device management scales across campuses. So ultimately, having some sort of cohesion across the institution is going to make this successful. The technical foundation is really what ensures that VR goes from a novelty to something that's dependable, consistent, and is enhancing instruction. That's really what we're looking for in increasing engagement. And our learners are ultimately walking out with the education and the knowledge they need to move forward in their studies. So a little bit of a reflection on the first phase. We had a 1-to-2 headset to student ratio. So we had 16 headsets and roughly about 30, well, the class held up to about 32 students at max. So we had a 1-to-2 headset ratio. So students would come in, share headsets, they would do labs together, maybe part of a learning activity. What we noticed is there was some downtime, interruptions, there were some issues there. And we thought, well, how can we improve that? And we thought, you know what, a shift to a 1-to-1 headset ratio uh, would be beneficial for our learners. And the reason for that is it eliminates downtime, sharing interruptions, it improves immersion, flow of instructor-led lessons, reduces technical friction from student to student. Students can spend more time with the technology. More time spent with the technology means more comfort. And so when they have more control, they feel more comfortable. So we shifted to a 1-to-1 headset ratio moving into phase two, which I'll touch on. We also decided that, okay, this was a success. So we're going to start moving this across multiple campuses. And so we started looking, I'll get into the procurement piece and whatnot in a moment. And then the last one, I'll let Stephanie touch on classroom assessments, as that's more in her realm.
Well, when we had the 1-to-2 ratio, it was sort of it was great because students did need to work with each other, and sometimes when they discuss issues, you get to hear and figure out sometimes when they share with each other, there's learning that happens as well. So it still is an organic learning situation, but it started to consume a lot of time. And then we were like, you know what, if we're going to move this to other campuses and to make it more efficient and that they get more comfortable, the more often that they're in, then the controllers and those technical pieces are not a concern. So when we were chatting, we were like, we need to move to a 1-to-1, even though that'll mean that we need to change the assessments and what those will look like later when they're identifying things. This year, one thing that we've sort of only just this past couple months have decided is one of our instructors, we started to create scenes because sometimes with some of the assessments, our students are still learning at a fairly high level, but not the same as if you are at a medical school. So sometimes there's more data and information in there than some of the students need. So sometimes they would start picking different structures or sites that weren't necessarily like that wasn't wrong, but they weren't. It was a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So one of our instructors did create some scenes where you can go in and you can have already sort of scaled to what the depth or level that they need to know. So that's been a very cool finding that we've had, and we'll continue to still morph and change some of our assessments as we go to help that flow and get the students engaged in there. Anyways, that's all.
Yeah, so moving into phase two, very similar approach with the procurement to the maintenance and sustainability. When we went into the procurement, obviously we started with 16 headsets. We moved into an additional 84 spread across 3 campuses. So there were some complexities there. Obviously, we had to work with our tech services, our IT department on the other campuses, work with our facilities department, procurement specialists, and the purchasing department to get everything ordered. It was very easy, honestly, working with 3D Organon to get the update and work with them to feel out what's going to be the most appropriate licensing structure for us. And of course, as I mentioned, network infrastructure was important, and we had to then update the mobile storage carts. And we decided that the cart that we had was beneficial. It was a good cart, so we purchased the same one for the other campuses. The anatomy labs and the instructions, they kind of move around. So having that mobile aspect was certainly beneficial for other campuses. So relatively similar approach there. Not as much research. What we were using already seemed to work well, and we just scaled up for other campuses. Setup and deployment was a little bit tricky. The lab configurations, because Stephanie mentioned, the labs are not consistent across our campuses. By doing this, we did want to create a consistent instructional practice across all 3 campuses. So we had to find a way, obviously, with our physical lab setup and the software to do that. The device setup was a bit tricky. Again, I hadn't learned my lesson yet. I did all the setup on 84 devices, which was a lot of work, but eventually we got them all set up and distributed to all the campuses. Required a little bit of travel on my part to get that set up, but we were able to do that. Software setup, the improvement on the licensing setup really made a difference in this phase. Phase one, it was a little more arduous and work on my part. In this phase, a lot easier, a lot smoother. So I really do appreciate that update. And then deployment, we spent a lot of time working with the instructors on the other campuses, training them, held some virtual sessions. I do have colleagues on the other campuses that were doing a lot of training and support with those instructors to ensure the deployment and whatnot was smooth on each of those campuses. Of course, in Regina, we were already moving, so it wasn't so much work here, but on the other campuses, it was. So, and then maintenance sustainability, we scaled up, so we had to update our sanitization protocols, updating battery and charging cycles. We're still in question at this point, which we found a change for that. Life cycle planning. Well, we have 99 headsets now, so that's a lot larger than 16. And so now how is that going to work in 4 to 5 years' time? And so we're continuously working on a plan for that. And then the cart storage, physically, where's that cart going to sit? And then ensuring there's support on other campuses. Here on this campus, I can support Stephanie and her instructor almost at any point in time that they need, but ensuring that my colleagues or there's support on the other campuses for the instructors was important, and then my colleagues are ready to support them. So we're ensuring that everyone is up to date and ready to go. IT, tech services was ready to support if needed as well. So
To share, interesting, I'm through both the pilot and this year's phase two. We're not quite done, but almost done phase two. It was really interesting to see when we would get student feedback that this experiences from last year and this year are very similar. So I've just put together a few statements that when students found, they were excited, they were happier to come to class. It's easier to understand anatomy when I can see things in 3D. Helps me visualize things that were confusing in the textbook. We still have a reference textbook, but and a lot of them start to feel more prepared. It's really interesting to see when they finally get something and get that excited mode. We walk around often when they're doing some of their assessments. I guess you'll talk about the pass-through mode, but so that you don't scare them. But it's really interesting to see them come from some people not ever using VR, feeling a little bit uncomfortable and sometimes scared, to feeling like empowered and emboldened and start to ask really good questions about the anatomy that they're learning. So it's been very positive. There has been, like, I can think of this year, there's one of our campuses, one student that really does struggle. A few don't. We'll talk about challenges and things later, but for the most part, I feel like students have done really well. In terms of instructor experience, there's a lot of positives. If, what's the downside? It takes a little bit longer. We need more time for certain things. But in terms of what are we noticing, like they're doing better on some of the assessments. Not that that's the only piece, but they're more engaged. They want to come to class more. They are starting to identify and understand those relationships and some of those structures better and quicker as they get in there with more frequency. So it's been positive all around. I've been really happy with my instructors too. It's changing their realm of now you have to get comfortable with the technology. Can you be vulnerable sometimes in front of a student? If something doesn't go well while you're teaching, yes, you might be an expert in anatomy or physiology, but now you're casting and something goes wrong. So that doesn't happen a lot, but I'm really impressed with my faculty in terms of how they've embraced it and have been willing to try different things.
yeah.
So needless to say, there's challenges and solutions. A few I've alluded to. So we've sort of created what are some of the creative things that we had to come up with?
So some of the first one here, I put motion sickness, which is relatively rare. And a software like 3D Organon and many of the educational softwares we use at Sask Polytech, it doesn't typically create that it kind of knock out your vestibular system a bit to make you feel nauseous or dizzy. Just the way it's designed and what you're doing in the software. So very rare, but sometimes it does happen. So we do start with shorter first sessions. Don't put the students in for too long when they first start. We do encourage students to start seated if they need to, and then just kind of go through that acclimation phase. So just do that, shorter bouts over time. There are some students that do feel uncomfortable in VR, and Steph alluded to that, where some just are like, I don't feel comfortable. Whether that is feeling claustrophobic, I know some students do say that. yes, you can be in VR in a completely different world. You could be walking on Mars and there is space there's just kilometers or miles and miles and miles of space in front of you. But they still feel claustrophobic. That headset just gives them that feeling. What's nice about 3D Organon is being able to use that pass-through or that mixed reality mode, especially with our MetaQuest 3 and 3S headsets. That's what we've been doing a lot with our students. And actually, that's what I encourage all of our instructors to do, is get the students to turn on pass-through mode. And that way they can see the room. They can still see the anatomical structure and all the important menus and definitions and whatnot. But they can still see the room. They know where they are. They can see the other learners around them. But then they still have that ability to talk with the instructor. The instructor is moving around the classroom. They can see the instructor. They can ask questions. And I'll get into a little bit of the troubleshooting piece as well as navigating the anatomical structures and asking questions about specific things and the instructor being able to see that. Sorry, this is my invisible iPad that I'm pointing to, so I'll explain that in a moment. Navigation difficulties. So there's some tech fluency issues, and it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter on the student. There's just some are more comfortable, some aren't. Some understand technology more than others. Some have been in virtual reality before, and some haven't. And I think that some being in virtual reality and some haven't is important for two reasons. Sometimes people are in virtual reality before and they have a great experience, so they're excited to come do it again. Some do virtual reality before and have a negative experience. Their friends put them in a headset and they go on a roller coaster ride and then they feel dizzy and nauseous and sick and it was not enjoyable at all. And now they're thinking, oh, we're doing this again. I don't want to feel like that. So it's navigating those types of hurdles that was really important for us. So a VR orientation session was very important for the students. So of course, arts and science delivers the programming for our practical nursing student or nursing program. We had to go to the program and ask them for more time to include an orientation session, have an hour with the students before they start delving into the world of anatomy to get them used to the headsets. Just get the headsets on their heads, get them playing with the controllers, get them navigating, get them just trying things out, getting comfortable with things to kind of break down some of those pre-misconceptions that they are the ideas that they had before, and then get them used to it, which makes things easier down the road. So an orientation session was very, very important. One question I always ask when I'm in rooms is who has and who hasn't been in virtual reality before? And what I usually do is say, okay, those of you that have, I want you to pair up with someone who hasn't. And that allows for a little bit of peer coaching, which is great because it saves the instructor and the other people supporting some time because those people might have some ideas, be familiar with the tech, and they can help their partner out a little bit. So peer coaching was really important. And then instructor demo casting, ensuring that we have the infrastructure set up. Using Manage XR makes it very easy to cast to our 80-inch screen. We had other screens in Regina, so we could cast to those screens as well, which makes it easy for us to do some demos before the students actually get into the headsets. And I think another solution we've come up with this year, as Stephanie mentioned, was using scenes. Navigation can be a bit of an issue. So having your scene set up ahead of time really knocks a lot of time off for the learners having to go in, maybe select a system, pull things apart and find exactly what they need to be doing. That can already be set up in a scene. So that's taken care of some of our navigation as well as some of our time consumption issues. Time consumption of VR orientation session really helped with that. We've been granted extra instructional time with that orientation session as well as throughout the academic year to incorporate this tech. So working with the program really helped with that. We're using our LMS Brightspace to post resources in so students can look for support material, videos ahead of time on how to use the software and the hardware. So all that's posted in the management system ahead of time so students can get some additional or kind of pre-briefing on some of this stuff before they actually walk in. And then extra hands for the first few sessions. So our instructor, Mylena, when she started, Stephanie and I made sure that we were in the room with her for the first 2 or 3 sessions to ensure that things were going smooth and help her as needed. So extra hands was certainly great. Now she's kind of flying on her own, which is great. That's the ultimate goal. Slow troubleshooting was a big issue. So a student puts a headset on and they go, I don't know how to do, something's not working with my controller, or when I click this, it doesn't work, or whatever it is. And so what they would do is they would take the headset off, they would hand it to one of us, and then we would put it on. One issue there is sanitary issues. We're now sharing from head to head. Not super comfortable with that. But also it's now time consuming. Take the headset, move it over here. I now have to create a new boundary. And then now I have to go in and fix something, explain it to that person, put it back on, now explain how to create a new boundary. It took up a lot of time. So one thing we've done with Manage XR is just using their system is I carry a tablet around, so just an iPad with me. And when I walk around the classroom and student headset 6 says, hey, I'm having an issue, I can't select this, or something is happening here. So I just press the stream button next to their headset. They don't have to do anything. Automatically, what's in their headset appears on my iPad, and I'm able to talk with them and walk them through the solutions, which has saved a lot of time. It's more sanitary, and it's really easy. Headset 6 is done. Well, now 16 needs help. So I just click on 16 and it's really sped things up. So thinking about how we can use other technology to enhance and make things a little bit more streamlined is important. Touch interface from the desktop version was an issue with us. So we have that accessibility piece. Using the view boards sometimes didn't seem to jive with the technology super well. So all we did there is we just made sure we brought some mouses in and connected it to the PCs to, if there was some issues, they could use the mouse. I think it's more of a view board type of issue, but we were able to solve that. Classroom management with VR, of course, the 1 to 2, as we mentioned, was certainly not helping. So we went to 1 to 1 to increase flow and engagement. And then headset charging was the over and under concern. What we did is we actually purchased analog timers. You can set from what time to what time you want the power to turn on. We plug our card into the wall from 8 p.m. for 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours. It charges at night, and then it's done. So it ensures the headsets are fully charged the next day without keeping them charging all the time. I've found with some of our mobile lab that the batteries are degrading because they've been charging too much. This, even if they're fully charged, 4 to 5 hours should be okay, opposed to 15 to 20 plus hours sitting on a charge. So this allows us to ensure we're not going to overcharge and allows us to ensure we're not going to walk into dead headsets the next day. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, it's all good. In terms of, well, that's okay. I can talk for whatever. Like you can fill in whatever I miss. In terms of where we headed, well, in terms of the anatomy courses, we've been super happy with 3D Organon. We still want to continue to enhance our assessments, but the plan for next year and going forward is starting to add VR into some of our other anatomy courses. We have a head and neck class for our dental hygiene students, and to sort of move it into psychiatric nursing. So more curriculum integration with the assessment piece, changing hopefully maybe eventually we can get to VR-based quizzes. Right now it's a lot of times checklists, finding things and completing worksheets. But with any of those sorts of things, building the capacity with faculty, getting them to buy in, getting them to feel comfortable with the technology and what's there, so that the learners, they can sense when we're not, if you haven't bought in. So that's really important. And we'll continue to collect data. So when I said like 7%, like where students are doing better, my sample size is still low. So I'm not going to say whether I can say that is it statistically significant or not. But when I do look pre-VR the first year, and then now when we start to have a little bit more, there are differences and they are in a positive direction. So we want to keep, asking our students and finding even some of those subjective things. Are they, can we see is attendance there? Are they more comfortable? And continue that, because that gives us good feedback in terms of, do we need to change anything? I I don't know what your last point were there with interprofessional VR scenarios. That'd be cool. Like different things that we're incorporating.
Enrich.
Okay. Keenan made this black. But anyways, we are, I think, we want to continue with immersive technology.
And one thing I forgot to mention, and it kind of builds into the student engagement and getting our students into more fluent, more comfortable, but utilizing the tech more for their benefit, is utilizing our library and our library services for it. So one thing we've started this year is with the cart actually, our carts actually are stored and live in our libraries. And students after hours can actually go from just right now, we're just limiting it to this program. They can go to the library, book the headset out for 4 hours for in-library use only, and they can continue their studies and immersion in VR anatomy. We've had some uptake in it. It took a little bit of time, I think, for the students to start taking advantage of that service, but that's a service we would like to start building in the future, not only for these students, but I would love to see our library services have headsets for borrowing, so students can whether it's in anatomy, whether it's soft skills or nursing and clinical, they can come to our library, they can book out a headset, and they can continue their studies. They can refine their skills and continue to do the work that they're doing in these headsets and in this technology outside of the classroom. Not only does that give them more exposure, lets them feel more comfortable with the tech, it also allows them to continue and to improve their skills. And I think with VR anatomy, something I wish I had when I took my kin degree, looking at a textbook was not ideal. But going to the library and spending some time in a headset looking at 3D objects, boy, it would have been a game changer for me. So I think that's a future goal for us, is to increase that service so our learners have more access to this technology and they can do more work with it. I think is going to be very beneficial.
Yeah. So I know we talked a lot.
Yeah, I talked too much.
If anyone wants to do, I'll put up our contact information if anyone does want to email us. But if anyone does want to ask questions, we're still available for some time.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, Stephanie and Keenan. And we will be happy to take any questions that you may have during this webinar presentation. Sonia Wald, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She asks, how many instructors are needed to each program for teaching anatomy using VR? And what is the average number of headsets in use at any given time?
Well, right. The number would probably vary a little bit depending on the program. But right now with practical nursing, the class size is around 30. And right now we have one instructor per 30 students, roughly, give or take. Now, sometimes when we are doing VR, Keenan will come, or one of our other, if it's on a different campus, a learning technology person will come initially. And if they're brand new or it's at the very start of a semester, then we might have two or three. You might have two or three at the very start, but as a semester goes and an instructor feels more confident, our thought is they should be able to, like, the learning technology person can come, so maybe two, but the learning technology person eventually has a little less. They make sure, are there any initial issues, but then the instructor just goes. But right now, a lot of it's either casting and teaching, or then students have an opportunity to sit in their headset and work through a worksheet to complete things. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think that, to start, it usually takes probably about 2, maybe 3 as you're getting used to it. I'm actually headed to a classroom this morning with our cart and they've used the cart once before. And so there was the instructor and myself, and the two of us seemed to be sufficient with we ran 2 groups of 14. So 14 students, 2 of us walking around and helping the students certainly was sufficient. Today there'll be 2 of us, but in the future, her goal and my goal is that cart gets delivered by Learning Technologies, and she should be able to operate that. The students will be competent, and she'll be able to operate that on her own. Next year with new students, of course, we'll come in there and we'll help her because those students will need some orientation and support. But as the semester goes, we should see that improve. So with Stephanie's program and pilot, we're running closer to 30 students at a time. on average with our other programs, we're typically around, because we only have 16 headsets on our mobile lab, we're typically around that 12 to 14 at a time. So that is relatively manageable for me as one walking around with 14 people, and then having an instructor help as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think if your class size did start to get much larger than 30, we'd want to make sure your network can handle that. Or maybe if you have a designated space, you might need more. I don't know. We haven't gotten bigger than that yet, so I don't know. But hopefully that gives some help.
One question I see is what is the feedback you get from your students and how quickly they adopt this technology?
Most of the time, students are very happy. There are a few sometimes at the beginning that I think there can be a little bit of fear if they haven't ever been in VR or have had a negative experience. Yeah, I think most of the time they're usually pretty happy. If some of them are struggling, usually they'll chat with us after as well to say, can I have a little bit more time or can I look at things more? So far, our activities are worth marks, so students tend to be engaged, or if we don't have enough class time, they will, they can either go into the library with the VR headset to complete, or they can go to the software to complete things. Are there plans? 3D Organon does have a quiz feature, but I know it's an additional cost, so it's not something we've looked at. Because initially when we started, it wasn't customizable and the level was a bit high at times.
So yeah, does the system have its own built-in headset or does it require external ones? I'm thinking that means do you require to purchase your own? So it like we're using a MetaQuest 3 and MetaQuest 3S headsets, so they are standalone headsets. And they are purchased through a third party. So they are not through 3D Organon.
No.
It is external. But we do use the desktop version, which is through 3D Organon, and we use the browser option as well as the software downloaded off of Steam. So,
are we doing all of our FASA out of the headset? No, we sort of have lab activities that are worth marks in their assessment that they do, but they do have written exams and some quizzes that are not in the headset. They still will, for part of their licensing exams, they still need to know how to answer multiple choice questions and do things that are not in VR. So we have a blend.
Thank you again for your wonderful presentation.
thank you for having us.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you.
much. Thank you so much.